با سلام خدمت هموطنان عزیز. امروز خدمت جناب آقای ایان بلاک، کاندیدای حزب کانسرواتیو از حوزه انتخاباتی کوکویتلند و پورت کوکویتلند هستیم. ایشون قبول زحمت کردند و در یک جلسه آشنایی با کامیونیتی ایرانی تشریف آوردن که یک سری سوالاتی که برامون ارسال شده بود و حضاری که اینجا تشریف دارن سوالاتشون رو مطرح بکنن و ایشون پاسخگوی این سوالات باشن. من تشکر میکنم از ایشون از بابت تشریف فرمایید تو این برنامه فشرده‌ای که داشتن، قبول زحمت کردن و تشریف آوردن. I would like thanks, Ian. I know that your schedule is so tight, but thanks for accepting our invitation and coming here to share your vision with our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ian. من از خانم ارغوان دعوت میکنم که تشریف بیارن و ادامه گفتگو و سوالها رو ایشون در خدمت هموطنان عزیز باشن. Thank you.
Hi Ian, thanks so much for being here. با سلام خدمت همگی، من ارغوان احمدی هستم از انجمن فرهنگی ایرانیان ترای سیتی. مرسی از شما که تشریف آوردین امروز با ما هستین. من چند تا سوال دارم از ایان میپرسم و بعدش میتونیم از شما تماشاچیان سوال بپرسیم و هرچی و میتونین بعد با ایان صحبتاتونم بکنین اگر خواستین. من اول یک اینتروداکشن از ایان میدم. ایان بلاک مدیر با تجربه در صنعت تکنولوژی هستند که کار خود را با IBM شروع کردند. ایشان شرکت‌های مختلفی در بریتیش کلمبیا با موفقیت مدیریت کردند و 8 سال مدیر عامل هیئت تجارت ونکوور بزرگ بودند. ایشون 2 بار به عنوان نماینده ترای سیتیز در دولت بریتیش کلمبیا انتخاب شدند، در سال 2005 و 2009 و در 3 وزارتخانه اقتصادی مختلف به عنوان وزیر کابینه خدمت کردند. So Ian, once again, thanks so much for being here. I have some questions that have come in through the members of the society that I'd like to ask you, and then we can open it to more Q&A. So start off with the hottest topic, inflation. Sure. Inflation has been a major concern for Canadians recently, and the value of the Canadian dollar, as everybody knows, has dropped significantly. Yeah. What strategies would you and the Conservative Party implement to address inflation and strengthen the value of the Canadian dollar?
Well, the challenges with inflation speak to the broader challenges within our economy. You're right about the value of the dollar. It has dropped in the last 10 years since the current government took power. The value of the Canadian dollar is down almost 16%. And during that time, we've seen one of the largest inflationary periods in generations. Spurred on, frankly, by overspending on the part of the government. That has contributed to the fact that our housing is now twice as expensive as it was 10 years ago. Our food costs are about 20% higher than 5 years ago for 3% less. And it's not just a worldwide phenomenon, because that is a rate of increase on food costs that is 37% more than just across the border in Washington state. And while all that's been happening, our economy is stalled, because you've got a growth that's comparison to the United States, where our economy has literally grown about 1/10 of what America's has on a per capita basis. So once you adjust it for our different populations, their economy has literally grown almost 10 times as much as ours has. So this has been very, very troubling. And in order to fix something like this, we've got to get back to the basics. We absolutely have to provide tax relief to the Canadian citizens, and we have to stop treating our entrepreneurs and our investors as if they are the enemy. The current government launched a campaign in 2016-2017 where they called all the small business people tax cheats. And they used that language. The finance minister of the day used that language. And I was with, actually it was an Iranian gentleman who owns a business right here just down the street from where we're sitting at the moment. And in a meeting with him yesterday, his opening line was, when you open a business in Canada, you immediately seem to become the enemy of the government. And we've got to get away from that. When men and women take real risks to start businesses, and in many cases put their mortgage on the line. They could be walking away from a terrific job. We have to make sure that government paves the way for their success and then gets out of the way. So a large part about getting inflation under control is getting government spending under control, getting a tax relief in place for our citizens, making it attractive to invest in Canadian businesses again, which we plan to do through a capital gains tax exemption for Canadian business profits that get redirected back into Canadian businesses. So there's about 7 or 8 additional steps beyond that, but I'll pause there just to make sure that we're going in a direction that you'd like with the question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And I want to kind of continue on that economic thread. And I want to know if you can talk a little bit about the specific economic policies that you and the Conservatives would implement to not only reboot the economy, but also how they would differ from those proposed by Mark Carney and the current government.
Well, the challenge we have right now is we haven't really heard much from the current government. We've got the same cast of characters, the same ministers, the same members of parliament in place now that have been there for 10 years. All they've done is switch out a leader who's got no experience whatsoever in politics. But all the people who've made life so challenging for the last 10 years are still there. So as we go forward, what we know for sure about what we're going to do is a list of things I'll describe in a minute. But all we've seen from the Liberal government so far is, apart from stealing 3 or 4 of ideas and literally declaring that they will do the same thing that we've been promising to do for months, we actually haven't had that many promises out of them at all. We do know that they're going to keep our pipelines from being built, which is one of the major announcements they've made, which is very opposite to our own. So let me walk you through a few things that we're going to do. One of the first things we're going to do is implement a 15% tax reduction across the board for Canadians. We're also going to give tax relief for senior citizens to make sure that they're not having to choose between eating, because remember how expensive food has become, and heating, because with all the various carbon taxes that have been put in place through the last 10 years, they're having to make those difficult choices. So we have to start addressing that right away. One of the other things we're going to do to get the economy going is to eliminate the barriers on internal trade. Now, I was a trade minister for British Columbia about 15 years ago, and we have so many silly rules and regulations that differ from province to province to province in this country. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples because they're kind of fun. It's actually easier to buy craft beer out of the state of Washington than some of that amazing cheese that they produce in Quebec, right? We can't do it. And if you actually drive a truck, I love this one. If you have a truck in Victoria, British Columbia, and it drives all the way to St. John's, Newfoundland, it's actually offside with the law 17 different times. We can't even decide as a country on the definition of a truck, right? Axle weight, size of the wheels, length of the vehicle, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to get beyond ourselves and actually start eliminating some of these barriers between provinces. And there's an estimate there's about 3% additional growth in our economy that we could get just from doing what is so painfully obvious, which is to trade freely within our own country. So that's going to be a big part of the agenda as well. But I spoke about pipelines a minute ago, and this is really important. The Conservatives are committed to our energy industry. We produce the cleanest natural gas and cleanest processing around oil of any country in the world, right? The irony is, if you wanted to bring down greenhouse gases globally, you should actually have more Canadian petroleum products in circulation in other countries around the world because we produce them cleaner than anybody else. And yet, everything we sell in terms of oil is to the Americans. And we're all living the challenges around Donald Trump at the moment. But all of our oil is sold down into America because we can't get it to Tidewater because the federal Liberal government is not letting us. And they put a bill in place called C-69, which actually says outlaws any more pipelines. And yesterday, Mark Carney said he is not going to reverse that bill if he becomes Prime Minister. So if you're going to unlock the energy capacity of our country in mining and oil and natural gas, which is what builds our hospitals, schools, and roads, it's not, with the greatest of respect to our coffee shops and the amazing espressos we can get, that's not what builds the big stuff in the country. And so we have to unleash the power of our natural resources, and we are committed to that as a party. And the federal Liberals have made it very clear that they're not going to do that. So there's a couple of things that we've done there that we've promised. And as I've mentioned, there's a reinvestment tax credit that we're going to give. When you get capital gains from an investment of some kind, if you reinvest those proceeds into a Canadian business, you'll pay no tax on those profits, which would normally be taxed at around 24%. So that is a very brand new thing. No other country has done that, and it is being wildly applauded by economists as being something that could really inject life into our economy very, very quickly.
That's great. Thanks so much for that detailed explanation. I'm sure our viewers will certainly appreciate that. Shifting gears quite a bit, I want to talk about the opioid crisis. And as you know, the availability of drugs has increased significantly within not only our communities, but I'd say across the country. And the opioid crisis continues to affect communities everywhere. So what is your plan and the plan of the Conservative Party for addressing this crisis and moving from harm reduction to more treatment-focused solutions?
Well, the last phrase there is exactly what our plan is. There's two separate phenomena that have taken place. There is the abundance of highly addictive opioids, which have the poisons that have permeated our communities. And there is no one group of people who are impacted more than others in this case. I mean, these are the brothers and sisters and moms and dads and cousins and uncles of people from British families, from Persian families, from Chinese families. It is not discriminating. This is a horrible, horrible situation, and over 50,000 Canadians have now died from this. That's more than we lost in soldiers in the Second World War. And it's a shocking number. And what was really concerning to me was listening to Mark Carney about 2 weeks ago maybe, where this was put to him, and he was dismissive of that number, and he was kind of brushing it off as not a big deal. And that is horrifying to me because it's very real for those families who are going through this. And the approach that has been taken, so that's kind of the scenario. The second part of the conversation is, what do you do about it? And several things have been tried in the last 15, 20 years, especially in the last 10, and they're not working. And harm reduction and the concept of safe supply, in theory, it sounds like it's a good idea, but the data is showing very clearly that it's not working, and too many people are dying. So we are of the belief that we end the safe supply programs and we put all that money into treatment so that we can bring our loved ones home, not cured from addiction, because you never really get cured from addiction, but you bring them home clean into a safe and loving environment that they can put their lives back together and move on with some of the burdens of that horrible experience behind them.
Thanks very much, Ian. I want to shift gears a bit again and move on to the topic of immigration. So I know this is a very hot topic. I'm an immigrant myself. My family and I immigrated to Canada back in 2001. I know almost all of you here are likely immigrants, and our viewers at home also. I'm sure a lot of them are immigrants to Canada as well. So the question that I have for you is, how has Canada's approach to immigration and housing contributed to the current crisis, and what changes are needed to restore a sustainable system?
Well, there's a lot there. There's no doubt that part of our housing crisis that we have at the moment is tied to the damage that has been done to what was the best immigration system in the world. Conservatives are big believers in immigration. One of the highest, if not the highest level of immigration that took place under the old system before it was damaged so badly by the current government, took place under Stephen Harper. And I believe Jason Kenney was the immigration minister at the time. So we're very big believers in immigration. But what has happened in the last 10 years is that world-class system has been dismantled. And you're not bringing, the same system that brought your family to Canada, that brought my mom and dad to this country, a points-based system where we were looking for people who were contributing to our country, who could pay their own way, who had skills and experience and education, who could help hit the ground running, if you will, and really build our country. And it was a points-based system, and very often people had to apply multiple times because it really meant something to get access to this amazing country of ours. That no longer is the case. And we made a very big mistake responding to a really difficult situation in terms of refugees around the world. But we brought in 1.2 million people last year, and we only built 200,000 homes. That math just doesn't work. And it's interesting that the most And this is where you can't just blame the problems that the Liberal government has created with the immigration system on the housing crisis. There's a whole lot of other things that they've done as well to create this problem. And part of it is they just haven't built enough homes or encouraged enough homes to be built. Because the most homes we ever built in this country was in 1975. And it was about 272,000 people. 272,000 homes, right? When our population of our country was about half of what it is today. And yet, last year, we only built about 225,000 homes, 50,000 less than the high water mark that was set back in 1975 when our country was half the size it is today. This is the problem, that the government has been asleep at the switch. They have not made sure that the housing is being built the way it should be, and they've not made accommodations for assisting municipalities and provinces to build the type of housing they need. And what I mean by that is you've now got cities and provinces who have got as much as 30% to 35% of the cost of a new home or condominium is actually government taxes and fees and permitting. And that is not acceptable. And so what we're going to do is, if we're going to contribute to any housing developments in this country, we will be rewarding those cities who are able to get the costs out of that in terms of the fees and permitting, but also, and this is really important, is to speed up the cost of, or to speed up the time it takes to build. Right now, if you were to build a small apartment complex, it's not unreasonable, at least in British Columbia, where it can take up to 5 years from the time that you submit an application for a permit to the fact you can, to the point where you can put a shovel in the ground. 5 years. That is the period of time twice in our history when we have entered into and won a world war. And we can't build some apartment buildings. So this clearly has to change. The thinking has to change, and our government is committed to incenting those cities who are willing to show that they understand that, and we will give them more money than those cities who do not. We will penalize the ones who actually don't respond.
So just to clarify, and I know a lot of folks want to know, the Conservatives are very much for immigration and they're
100%.
big supporters of immigration.
Absolutely, but not the way it's been done.
Yeah.
Because the way it's been done has created the problem. We want to get back to that world-class system that brought your family here and many of the people here. It was a different system back then, and it was still very, very generous. And it was bringing in 250 to 300,000 people a year, not 1.2 million. Many of whom don't have the support systems when they arrive. So these families, many of whom are trying to escape some horrible, tragic situations, are set up to fail within our own country because they don't have the support systems put in place for their arrival, in terms of language, in terms of job skills, in terms of understanding our healthcare system, and getting them working in the workforce and supporting their own families quickly enough, and not looking to the state to assist them for an unreasonable period of time.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Ian. This wraps up all the questions that I had put together. I do have one final closing one before I open it up to the audience that are sitting here. So, looking ahead, as I always like to kind of looking into the future, what do you think Canada's future will look like if we continue on the current path? And what changes would you prioritize in order to build a stronger and more prosperous country?
Wow. Well, I think we're living it in real time at the moment. This is one of the, we've got a young person sitting in the front row here. This is one of the most interesting periods in history. You will not experience another election like this, and probably in your lifetime. You've got a very unusual individual in the President of the United States. And for whatever reason, he's attacking Canada with unjustified and illegal, frankly, tariffs. But it's more than that. He sees a weak country. We have allowed ourselves to become weak. We don't defend our borders. We don't defend our northern borders. We've allowed our military to languish to the point that we're spending more money on Revenue Canada than we are in our military. This is just not acceptable. And we've got a point now where, through the actions of the United States, we're vulnerable. And I think if we continue on the path we are on, we are going to find ourselves vulnerable not just to the United States, but to many others. And candidly, we can't continue on the path that we're on. There is no more tax to collect from the people or the businesses in this country. The demand for our natural resources is through the roof all over the world. We have to, respond to that demand. So let me paint that picture of what it could look like. We're very much focused on getting back to some of the basics. We have to lower the taxes in this country. We have to do something about crime. I mean, you asked me earlier about opioids. That is so tightly tied to crime as well, where our violent crime has gone way up because we've made it very easy for violent and repeat offenders to get bail and not jail. and many of those also in the drug trade, which is tied back to the opioid challenge. Well, we're willing to step up to that and do something about it because it is destroying our communities. We absolutely have to get our budget under control. I mean, we have spent more money, this government has added more to the debt in the 10 years that they've been in power than every other government in Canadian history combined. Combined. So that is frankly a tax that we put on our children and grandchildren because those bills sooner or later have to get paid. So we are about getting the house in order financially, but it's actually more than that. It's about restoring a sense of comfort and confidence in families that they can actually get jobs that pay them strong wages, where they can pay their bills without being worried about some of those challenging decisions that everybody's making right now, and that their children can play in a safe street in the front of their house, and that they're able to actually have some choices to make as to how they want to raise their children in what should be and could be once again one of the great countries in the world.
Absolutely. Well, we really look forward to to see what the election results end up being.
Me too.
But once again, thank you so much for being here, Ian. Thank you all for joining us and our viewers at home. We're now going to open it up to questions from the audience.
I think the starting point is that we never want to find ourselves there. I think staying on top of it, and we deploy right now the strongest environmental standards in the world on everything that we do, and not just in terms of, I mentioned earlier about oil and gas, but just in terms of like transportation and emissions control from manufacturing facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're aware that we have something really special here, and I think that I don't think there's anybody who wants us to put that at risk. I do think, it sounds a little backwards, I know, but when you look at some of the dirtiest, I'll use oil as an example, right? Venezuela is a great example. You've got a brutal dictatorship in Venezuela who produces some of the dirtiest oil in the world, and to a lesser extent natural gas, where we could, for the same price, be providing that to their customers, which would actually bring greenhouse gases down globally because we're no longer buying from them, all right? And you've got other countries that are brutal dictatorships that are very not fair, frankly, they subjugate women. And those countries as well are providing oil and gas, and we could take their place. But you did talk about fresh water, so let me touch on something that's really important to us. We've got a series of Indigenous communities in this country, and about 45 of them still don't have safe drinking water in their facilities. And the current government promised to solve that problem, and they've not. And that to me makes me scratch my head. Because in this day and age, with the amount of money that has been wasted by our current government, and it's in the billions of dollars, that money being put into appropriate approaches to actually allow our Indigenous communities to live in the dignity of decent fresh water, I think is a major failure of the previous government, right? So you're asking good questions though, because it's about prevention, it's about not taking our eye off it, and we've seen too many examples lately when we do take our eye off it, we get into trouble, right? First of all, it was the Conservative Party 7 years ago that first introduced a motion in Parliament to declare as a terrorist organization the IRGC. All right? It took 6 years before the federal Liberals agreed to acknowledge that. So we have been very firmly standing with the Iranian people against a very brutal government for many, many years. And so the spirit of our interest in Iranian people who want to come to Canada and to help contribute to building this great country has been there for many, many years. That's not a new thing, all right? Secondly, whether it's from Iran or whether it's from Scotland, which is where my mom and dad came from, whatever the country is of choice, the rules have to be consistent and they have to be fair and they have to be followed. And I think part of the problem that we've had in the last 10 years is that we've seen people take advantage of the system, coming in on student visas where they really weren't even attending university, and they were brought in by companies here in Canada that were actually, they were acting dishonestly, and they were actually exploiting young people come from other countries and charging them money, and then leaving them almost abandoned when it realized that they couldn't actually get the dream of coming to this country in the first place. And we've got to make sure that we really crack down on people who are breaking the rules like that. What we do want in this country are people who want to help build it. And we are very interested in immigration. And frankly, we need immigration. This is not This is not like a judgment call of, do we like it or we don't like it. We are not going to grow our country without a healthy and consistent supply of immigration. But some of the challenge we have that we have to address at the same time, including with many Iranian people, is the fact that we don't recognize foreign credentials the way that we should. I mean, there's a joke, it's not really a joke, but it's said as a joke, that if you have a medical problem in Vancouver, don't call 911, call Uber. So you're all laughing because you get the joke, right? You're laughing because I have been picked up at my home in the last 2 years, no fewer than 5 times. Different people, with a really nice person, a little bit older than I am, who shares with me that he's a pediatric surgeon trained in Tehran. And very nice gentleman, and I say, well, we need doctors. Why aren't you, helping people, helping families whose children need surgery at Vancouver General Hospital or Eagle Ridge Hospital here in the Tri-Cities? And he says, they won't recognize my credentials, right? But that also goes for nurses and for engineers. And so one of the things that Conservatives have promised, and Pierre Poilievre, our leader, has promised in the last few days, is something called the Blue Seal program. And there's a program, so anyone who's involved in the trades will know about Red Seal. And Red Seal is if you're a carpenter, if you're a plumber, and you get a designation that's actually transferable to other jurisdictions because it's a piece, effectively it's a certification that's recognized. And we've proposed to do the same thing for various professions to help contribute to what you're saying. Because I think right now, the way it's set up, we're encouraging people to kind of find different ways of working the system. And it just all needs to be cleaned up and made consistent and fair. And we need to make sure that people are able to get family members once they've got, this is the way it used to be, is you get family members who came to Canada, and then we encouraged those families to stay connected through the years, whether it's for visitation or immigrating themselves. And that's how it was with my mom and dad. And that's how it was until about 10 years ago. And we need to get back there. And we're very committed to it because we need immigration. Conservatives are very, very interested in immigration from all over the world. Brilliant people from Iran would be welcome at any time as far as I'm concerned. Thank you for asking that question. I know it's an important question, and it's a very sensitive one, and we're taking it head on. Well, that's mainly handled, so the question was, do we have plans to improve access to healthcare? So healthcare is handled at the provincial level. Federally, the government's job is mainly around transferring of money for that. We used to have a terrific healthcare system in Canada, and I think it slipped a little bit in the last number of years. But we remain very, very committed to a single-payer system in this country. We think we can do better, for sure. I have a lot of friends who are doctors, and they'll talk my ear off for all night telling me the things that could be improved. And I think we have to keep our eyes and ears open around how we keep this amazing single-payer, universal healthcare system strong, get it stronger, and listen to some creative ideas. But a lot of that is handled at the provincial level, and so we don't get into the specifics of it, but we are fully committed. I mean, we all have families. And so, as elected people and party members who aren't elected, we all have families and we all need a fantastic healthcare system. So we're very much committed to seeing that continue and get better. You're again talking about the capacity of Canada to take on new arrivals, new Canadians, relative to the number of houses that are available. And one of the reasons we are in the really difficult, the word crisis gets used, and I think it's the appropriate word. When you bring in 1.2 million people, but you've only got 200,000 or 250,000 houses, so a whole lot of people are going to go, where am I going to live? And so all the houses that do exist, what happens? The prices go up, right? Because whenever you've got a limited amount of resource and a whole lot of money chasing it, the price of that goes up. Right, that's inflation by definition. Too much money chasing too few goods. I remember that from first-year economics, actually. But that's what you're seeing happen at a large scale across Canada, especially in big cities like Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, where the housing prices are literally twice what they were 10 years ago. Many people, including people in this room, probably couldn't buy their own home today. If they didn't buy it 10, 15, 20 years ago, they'd be priced out of the market. They just wouldn't have the money to do it. So to get around that, there's a few things that the federal government can do. And I spoke a little bit about it earlier, which is to work with the cities who are ultimately responsible for issuing the permits so that the men and women can show up and actually put a shovel in the ground and start building something, right? So the federal government wants to work with those cities who are willing to be aggressive and build more. And when there are programs for subsidized housing, whether it's for new Canadians or existing Canadians who are lower income in some fashion, or seniors housing, right? To the extent that the federal government gets involved in that, we will work with those cities who build faster and who build cheaper by taking the costs of tax and the cost of permitting out of it. But what we've also done is we've removed GST, which is a 5% tax, right? And the government has said we are going to remove GST from the cost of houses up to $1.3 million, right? So that will literally, on a new house, that will literally save you $65,000, which is real money when you're trying to get into, especially if you're a new Canadian or new home buyer. That's a significant amount of money, and if you paid interest on that for 25 or 30 years, it would suddenly become, twice that and more. So those are the types of things we're looking at, but we're really serious about trying to do what we can to help on that one, because it's not okay. I have boys a little older than you, and they both moved away, and they moved away because they can't afford to stay in the Tri-Cities and get the kind of jobs that they want, and that's not okay. No parent in this room wants their children to move away. There's a lot of that is provincial, especially around things like the specific example you gave. I'm fairly certain that the standards around flagging and keeping drivers and construction workers safe on construction sites that are on the roadways, I'm fairly certain that's controlled mainly by people like WorkSafe BC and the standards through the Ministry of Transportation, I suspect. So that's all provincial. There's an element that sort of weighs into federally, so I'm going to shamelessly kind of connect it if I can. The British Columbia has had a wonderful experience in that certification. We talked about the blue seal, red seal, the concept of recognition of different skills in different areas. And because we signed, when I was in government before, we signed an agreement called the Trade Investment and Labour Mobility Agreement, which is a mouthful. But it was an agreement with Alberta that was so successful that it then got extended to Saskatchewan while I was in government as well, because it did exactly what we're talking about in some of these other challenges in between the provinces. So we know this can work. And so we knew that, for example, a plumber or a pipe fitter, they could have a job and they could live on the Alberta BC border, up in places like Puskupi and Fort St. John's, and they could actually, which by the way is about a 5-minute drive from the city in Alberta, Prince Albert. Oh, it's Prince Albert. I've lost my. I forgot the name of the city. Forgive me. It'll come to me. I'll blurt it out in a minute. But they go back and forth all day long. They go for Tim Hortons on one side and they go do their shopping on the other. So they're going in and out of the province. But the crazy thing was they couldn't work in each other's province if you were a plumber or a carpenter or a tradesperson. So we know this can work because we've seen it work, and I think the idea to extrapolate that across Canada is very important. It doesn't address specifically what you were talking about, but the concept that but one place where it does is when you're dealing with new Canadians, and this actually ties back to your question, Kia, around housing. Because if you're going to bring in 1.2 million Canadians, you not only have to have a place for them to live, you also have to have the ability to integrate them into the job market, which is exactly what you're talking about, right? And the schools and the healthcare system, and put the services around them so that you give these families, many of whom are leaving very bad situation, give them a chance, give them a really good shot at building the amazing life that so many of you in this room have got. So it does cross into it a little bit better. This is part of the cultural shift that we have to see happen in our country. We have to reward success. We have to be proud of the men and women who are starting businesses and trying to do something for their families and build their family and take it to the next level and take real risks and not treat them as the enemy, which the current government does, right? And we don't believe in that. We think that's not how you build a country. So that's part of a cultural thing, that if we lead by example at the federal government and we lean into our provincial and municipal governments, the tone gets set, right? And we've pulled away the welcome mat of investment in this country. With some of the things that have happened in the last 10 years, there's about $500 billion. That's $500 billion that we believe has gone into America from other investors around the world who've come here and said, we'll start companies here, we'll start factories here, we'll build pipelines here, right? And, you know, Mark Carney's company is a great example. Mr. Carney has got pipelines he's built in 6 different countries, but he won't let one get built in Canada, right? Well, that was 200,000 jobs that we figure has gone down to America. So the tone has to get set at the top of the federal government, and we are a government in waiting that believes that that's what we should do. But let me go to the other elements of Granville Street, because I think it's a great example. So my daughter is a performer, and so she has occasion to be down in that area playing music. And as her father, you need to know how uncomfortable I am at 2 a.m. when she's coming home with her band. And that's not a comforting feeling as a parent, because you do have an issue with drugs down there, and you've got an issue with crime. And the drugs and crime thing absolutely have a play, or have an element of federal jurisdiction. The Canadian government owns the criminal code. And so when I talked about drugs a little bit earlier and really increasing the penalties for the terrible people who are peddling poison that is killing our kids, we're very serious about that. So we have something to say about that. We also have to give our police officers the tools that they need to do their jobs. I believe it was about, I think the number's 40 people that the Vancouver Police Department knows commits about 85% of the crime in the downtown East Side area. These are repeat offenders who are not in jail long enough to get processed before they're back on the street. And in the case of some of the violent ones, they're often out on bail before the victims have cleared the emergency room. Like, this is not okay. But we have to give our police officers the tools that they need to do their job, and a lot of that is controlled at the federal government, and we are committed to backing the men and women in the police force in this country so that we can make Granville Street and other streets all over Canada, which are just like it, make them vibrant, fun places to hang out, not just for our young people, but for us old guys too. I believe that part of the reasons we need to elect Pierre Poilievre as our Prime Minister is we need to restore our credibility on the world stage, which is really what you're talking about. And when it comes to oil, right, it is incredible to me that, as you say, if you take unsanctioned countries, we're second in the world, right? We still import 179 million barrels of oil a year. We import 179 million. Now, we export to the United States. And this is where it's tricky with the whole Donald Trump situation. The Americans use about 18 million barrels of oil every day. 12 of it they produce themselves. 6 of it they import. We give them, sell them, 4 of that 6, right? And we sell it to them, as you will know if you're in the business, we sell it to them at a 30% discount to world market prices. And the oil that they produce, they sell at full price, right? So you asked a very specific question a minute ago, is do we have a role in the world? And my answer is we should. We should have a role in the world that is significantly more than what it currently is. Like we've been known for so many wonderful things through history, but we've lost our way in so many different ways. We don't play a role militarily the way we should. We're not involved in the World Energy Program the way we should. And yet we do produce, as you will know, being in the industry, the cleanest standard of petroleum products on the planet. And we've got lots of them. So I believe that we are committed to that. We've actually announced a trade energy corridor. Pierre Poilievre announced this 2 days ago. And it is ambitious, and it's a pipeline from coast to coast to coast. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. It was a treat to see you, and to take some of the questions in the back and forth was really compelling and meaningful to me. And I loved your questions. I love how engaged you are and how much you care about the topics. You're going places. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Cheers. You bet.